The shaman hobbles up the rocky terrain, helped by his faith acolytes, who hoist him up as they reach the crest of the mountain. In the distance, the shaman can see it, standing like a man, but towering as tall as a god. It's still a good few hours' hike away, but even from the other side of the mountain, the gathered flock of pilgrims had seen its glow against the night sky. Led by the shaman, the group descends the mountain. Some slip or lose their footing thanks to being distracted by the sight before them, but nothing deters them, not the scrapes from the rock against their skin or the blisters covering the soles of their feet. Living in a time long before the birth of civilization, it takes time for word of anything to reach anyone, but news of the shaman and his strange dreams, visions of a towering figure of flame, spreads quickly. Then, others start having the same dreams. In any other age, that would be dismissed as confirmation bias or regarded as a phenomena of the shaman's dreams affecting those his flock had. But these weren't just similar dreams. They were identical visions, down to minute details, including where to find the fiery figure. The shaman and his acolytes came to a consensus. These dreams were an invitation, instructions on how to find the being they'd seen. Some even thought this could be the very creator of the world, waiting and wanting to be found. It wasn't. Having followed the river Tigris to a point where it intersected with the Euphrates, the shaman and his acolytes marched closer to the colossal being. It's enormous, shaped in many ways like a human, but with many striking differences. The creature is covered in wings that sprout from all over its body, its shoulders, back, temples, ankles, and wrists. To each of the acolytes, it looks slightly different. Some see multiple wings, hundreds even, while others can only make out a couple. Before it was a mighty blade made out of the same continuously burning flame as the figure. The weapon seems to have its tip buried in the ground, pointed downwards, its wielder standing vigilant and still, yet prepared, as if keeping watch. Behind it, as the acolytes sheepishly shuffle closer, they can see something in the haze of the creature's searing flames. There looks to be a gate, as vast as the fiery figure itself. Those who can see further, beyond the heat mirage, see what looks like paradise. The creature stands at the entrance to a pastoral grove, with what look to be fruit trees in abundance, though none of the group recognizes the strange fruits hanging from the branches. There are 2 trees, bigger than the others in the grove, standing at the heart of the space. One of the acolytes, their eyesight particularly sharp, mentions to another that one of these looks to be an enormous apple tree, while the other remains a mystery. Some notice, in the distance, more creatures like the one standing before the gate, multiple impossibly tall beings of pure fire, moving freely around the grove. All the while, the figure stands beyond the threshold, almost like a guardian between one world and another. By now, the flock have made their way considerably closer to the guardian, enough so that they're no longer looking at it in its entirety, but instead have to crane their necks to look up at it, until something causes them to stop in their tracks, a word not spoken aloud, but still heard by all of the acolytes.
Leave.
The booming voice rings in everyone's ears, as if the command was somehow spoken directly into their minds. Pausing, everyone turns to look at the shaman, the uncertainty on their faces conveying to him and each other that they've all heard the voice. But for some unknown reason, he didn't. The shaman ponders a moment. The dreams had told them to come here, to find this fiery being. Now, they're being told to leave. It doesn't add up. He urges his acolytes to follow, telling him that they should stay their course, only to realize that the others are stuck to the spot. None of them can move, as if their legs can't help but obey the bellowing command everyone but the shaman received. He turns towards the guardian once more, staff in one hand, and begins stepping closer. The others watch as their spiritual leader departs, none of them able to follow him. They call after him, hoping their pleas are enough to convince the shaman to turn back, join them in leaving. They've come to see the guardian. As the dreams had said, the pilgrimage has been a success, but the shaman isn't content to leave without answers. He trudges closer across the sand, so tiny in comparison to the Guardian that its flaming head, even the hilt of its sword, are obscured from the shaman's view now, even when leaning his head back to look upon the being. Then, without knowing it, the shaman's foot crosses the threshold. He has, unknowingly, stepped too close. He didn't realize because he was too busy staring in awe as the Guardian began to move. Before he can even think to ask why he's been summoned here, the shaman is gone. In the spot where he'd been standing only a second ago, there's nothing but a patch of dark, scorched ground. Small wisps of smoke rise from the charred earth. At a distance, the acolytes stop calling after the shaman, horrified at the sight of him being incinerated so fast that it was as if he'd vanished on the spot. Their ensuing panicked clamor reaches a fever pitch, just in time for them to hear another command in their heads.
Forget!
And just like that, they do. The amassed group turns and leaves, beginning their long journey home. The scribe, the member of their flock who has been recording the whole incident, drops his parchments. The pages containing his crude drawings and descriptions of the Guardian to be carried away by the wind. As they depart, not one of them is compelled to look back. None of them notice the silhouette of an elderly man with a staff left singed on the ground where the shaman had stood. Though historical documentation on the subject had always been hard to come by, scattered rumors of a proto-Abrahamic religious group making a pilgrimage to the rivers Tigris and Euphrates had persisted through the centuries. They were little more than stories, legends, and campfire stories told in distant parts of the world, with no real substantive proof that the pilgrimage had actually taken place. Until one day, thousands of years later, a page of parchment, carefully preserved for all that time, was discovered. Scrawled on it, drawn by the hands of some unnamed scribe, was a being that would become known as SCP-001, the Gate Guardian. The name of the man who had happened to discover the drawing was never recorded. However, it was thought he was some kind of freelance archaeologist or treasure hunter. Several suspects have been attributed to the discovery over the years, such as a seemingly unsuspecting university professor who worked at Cornell University in Ithaca, New York during the mid to late 1800s. Though his identity isn't known, what is are the details of what became of the parchment drawing, the first known depiction of the Gate Guardian. The page would be taken to Cornell University, where it became a point of fascination for a group of renowned students studying at the university. This was an enthusiast group with an interest in the occult, and among their number was a man named Aaron Siegel. Born in 1866 in Essex County, New Jersey, Siegel was on track to becoming an accomplished physicist within Cornell, but his true interest lay in that which couldn't be entirely defined by science or didn't even adhere to its laws. Siegel wanted to find explanations for the inexplicable, and the moment he saw the crude drawing of a giant winged being made of fire, he couldn't help but be fascinated. In his private journals, Siegel described having several vivid dreams about the being from the drawing. It had become an overnight obsession almost, so much so that he felt compelled to seek it out. He had to discover for himself if there was any truth to the stories, if the being was real. He had theorized that its discovery could have even been the impetus for every Abrahamic religion. That word of this fiery creature spreading slowly across the ancient world like an extended game of telephone might have been the common origin of faith and denomination that had followed in the centuries since. The missing link between man and God, as Siegel described in his journal on one particularly sleepless night. Finding exactly where the creature was would be the first of a few hurdles to clear. Siegel consulted various archaeologists about the recovered page depicting the Gate Guardian, trying to determine exactly where in the world he might find the mythical creature. Schools of thought were divided on the subject. Some archaeology experts seemed to believe that the place Siegel was looking for was in Kuwait, since that's where the page had been discovered, though there were numerous detractors who warned him that the drawing itself clearly showed an intersection of rivers. Finding that would be the key to finding the Guardian. Chasing the only solid lead he had, Siegel was faced with his next hurdle, getting there. It's never been recorded exactly how Aaron Siegel acquired both approval and funding from Cornell University to undertake an expedition to Kuwait. Rumors still circulate that he somehow blackmailed several of the university's faculties in order for him, as a physics student, to be allowed to conduct an archaeological excursion. It's not known how or precisely when Siegel arrived in Kuwait. Scattered retellings from older locals, passed down from their now deceased relatives, described him asking a lot of questions about an infamous parchment drawing. Locals warned Siegel to avoid the line of questioning, some claiming the drawing was simply of a fictitious being, that there was no real gate guardian to find. The details vary on what happened next. Some say Siegel made threats of violence against any who refused to tell him the truth. Other versions of the story claim he was helped by an unknown figure from the area. But either way, he learned that what he was looking for wasn't in Kuwait. The intersection of rivers shown in the crude drawing were, in fact, the Tigris and Euphrates, both of which mostly ran through the neighboring country of Iraq. There was, however, an intersection just north of the Kuwait-Iraq border, which Siegel was seemingly directed to head towards. In the most widely accepted version of the story, he was accompanied by the mysterious figure that told him to head for the rivers, though this individual has never been formally identified in any historical documentation. If Siegel did indeed have a guide on his expedition, then their name has been lost to history, perhaps intentionally. After sneaking undetected into Iraq and trekking for days, following the winding path of the river, Aaron Siegel finally crested a steep hill, and there, standing before him, was what he believed to be the missing link between mortals and God. Living, burning proof of the paranormal, the first anomaly ever discovered. Though it's said that he was dissuaded from approaching the fiery gate guardian by his companion, Siegel disregarded the warnings, marching closer and closer to the flaming entity and the entrance it stood stoically before. He'd been searching for years for proof of the occult, had literally crossed oceans to find the guardian. Siegel wasn't about to leave without answers. Looking up at the fiery figure that towered above him, easily over 1,200 feet tall, Aaron Siegel yelled up at the gate guardian. He wanted to know everything. What was the place that lay beyond the gate? Who were the other similar flaming humanoid creatures? And was there anything else in the world like them? These were all questions Siegel would get the answers to, just not then and there. They'd come later. It didn't matter how loud he shouted, how much he heard his own voice echo around him. It was clear his words weren't reaching the gigantic guardian's ears. So he wandered closer, unaware what the creature did to those that got too close. Then came a sudden response, the only one that Siegel would get from the gate guardian. It came in the form of a single, simple word, a command that was delivered directly into the man's mind. And it was one that differed from the other instructions given by the gate guardian to those who had found it in centuries past. Prepare! In an instant, Aaron Siegel knew what he had to do. He envisioned an organization, a collected effort to secure the paranormal and study artifacts or entities, all while keeping them safely contained and thus protecting humanity from the dangers of a world they could barely comprehend. He'd been given a rare gift, an opportunity to change the world, the very course of history itself. Quietly, calmly, Aaron Siegel departed the site where he'd found the gate guardian, more steadfast and determined than ever. In 1891, he would disappear from all public records shortly after returning home to Essex County, New Jersey, from his visit to Iraq. However, in the next few years leading up to his eventual vanishing, Siegel was described as more focused. He was utterly devoted to his goal of a protective foundation to safeguard the world and to help humanity prepare for an uncertain and perilous future, as was his directive from the Guardian, a calling Siegel himself believed to be divine. The organization he envisioned would indeed come to exist when Aaron Siegel founded the SCP Foundation. To this date, SCP-001, also known as the Gate Guardian, is one of the most powerful anomalies, if not the most powerful, that the Foundation has ever encountered. As detailed in his journals, it was Siegel's avowed belief that the Guardian was the angel Uriel, as described in the Old Testament of the Bible. Following his departure from the intersection of the Tigris and the Euphrates, Siegel began closely studying various texts, including ancient Babylonian writings, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and the biblical book of Genesis. Discovering what he believed were correlations between these vaguely proto-Abrahamic texts, Siegel concluded that the Gate Guardian was the angel guarding the entryway into the Garden of Eden. Sometime after the SCP Foundation was created, Site Zero was established near the location where the Gate Guardian had been encountered by Aaron Siegel in the late 1800s. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the Foundation began observation of SCP-001 around the clock, from a safe distance of just over 10 kilometers away. There was very little that could be done to contain the creature thanks to its mostly stationary nature, as well as its imperceptible but highly destructive capabilities. Speaking of, experimentation was conducted by the SCP Foundation in order to clearly establish the effective kill range of SCP-001. In Experiment Alpha, a member of D-Class was made to approach the Gate Guardian on foot. Upon visual contact with the Gate Guardian, the D-Class subject received the same psychic command to leave the area that the entity has often been known to give. They began to depart, despite repeated orders to continue with the experiment. As a result, the D-Class was terminated. At the exact moment of the termination, all members of the research team involved in Experiment Alpha were obliterated by an unknown force. It is thought that the Gate Guardian used its flaming sword in a retaliatory strike. From this, it was determined that the creature can move at speeds too fast to be perceived by the naked eye, or other observational methods. It was additionally noted that, despite the Gate Guardian and its weapon producing flames that rival the temperature of the sun, none of their surrounding area suffers any destructive effects from the intense heat. That is until such a time that SCP-001 initiates an attack, which is powerful enough to burn individual atoms, thus totally annihilating a target from existence. This was yet again witnessed during Experiment Bravo, wherein a remotely operated research robot approached SCP-001 from the ground. Upon breaching the 1-kilometer radius of the entity, the robot was destroyed by the Guardian's sword. Other further attempts to use remote reconnaissance to observe SCP-001 have had similar results. This includes Experiment Charlie, where 100 pre-programmed research drones approached the Gate Guardian from multiple angles. Despite being coordinated successfully, all 100 drones were destroyed by SCP-001 simultaneously, the creature seemingly being able to strike in every direction at once, while observers back at Site 0 noted that the Guardian did not deviate from its usual stance when the destruction occurred. Several attempts were made to weaken or damage SCP-001. However, all hostile action taken against the Gate Guardian is met with an instantaneous retaliation. Regardless of the range of the attacker, they will be instantly obliterated, as was seen during Experiment Delta. A wire-guided missile was fired 3 kilometers from the Guardian's position. However, the projectile was obliterated the moment it flew within 1 kilometer. Simultaneously, the launch site and all personnel were destroyed in an impossibly fast swing of the creature's fire sword. On December 26th in 2004, Experiment Echo was initiated. To this day, this remains the single most devastating experiment that the Foundation has ever conducted on SCP-001. With the goal of once again testing SCP-001's effective range, the Foundation authorized the firing of a multi-warhead intercontinental ballistic missile from a nuclear submarine, the Nautilus, stationed in the Indian Ocean. The ICBM was fired, and this once again resulted in the Gate Guardian retaliating, destroying the warhead itself and the Nautilus. Its destruction triggered the 2004 Indian Ocean earthquake and the devastating tsunami that followed. The disaster struck on the exact same date as Experiment Echo, beginning moments after the Foundation lost contact with the Nautilus. In the aftermath, around 35,000 people lost their lives, most of them civilians. This event almost had the additional ramification of exposing the Foundation's existence to the world. In order to cover up their involvement in the incident, a mandatory termination order was issued for any family, friends, and other individuals related in any way to the victims of the Indian Ocean earthquake. This was considered a necessary course of action by Foundation higher-ups in order to prevent any unwanted questioning surrounding the incident. Indirectly, SCP-001 was responsible for 227,898 deaths. Later, memory-altering and erasing drugs known as amnestics were deployed on a global scale in order to wipe any recollection of the incident ever taking place. In the aftermath, any and all experiments involving nuclear material against SCP-001 were banned under an order issued by the O5 Council. Several other experiments were conducted involving other anomalies, most notably experiments Foxtrot and Gamma, which saw SCP-076 and SCP-073 respectively brought before SCP-001. Both anomalous individuals, known alternatively as Abel and Cain, experienced adverse reactions to the Gate Guardian and were notably distressed by the entity, lending some credence to Aaron Siegel's belief of a connection between these anomalous figures and those referenced in biblical texts. At present, any further experimentation involving SCP-001 had been prohibited under an executive order from the administrator of the Foundation themselves. No other SCPs are to be exposed to the Gate Guardian, and its destructive capabilities are not to be used to destroy and dispose of dangerous anomalies. This is largely owing to growing concerns surrounding an errant transmission regarding SCP-001 that the Foundation received. While initially thought to be a hoax, the staff at Site-0 have determined the signal they received came from the distant future. It detailed a potentially world-ending disaster that may occur if the Gate Guardian ever leaves its post in front of the gate. At some undisclosed point in the future, SCP-001 left the location it has been standing in for centuries, if not millennia. This allowed entities believed to be the four horsemen of the apocalypse to ride out from the Garden of Eden. Simultaneously, SCP-995 breached containment, SCP-616 opened, and SCP-098 was activated. The Foundation would order both SCP-076-2 and SCP-073 to be freed, while all other non-essential anomalies were terminated, along with personnel. SCP-001 remains under observation. Should it become active, then personnel are required to consult the emergency orders, specifically the Patmos series. The following precautions are to be taken to prepare for the likely event of an end-of-the-world scenario. Personnel with vital roles in the Patmos emergency procedures are to maintain good relations with one or more organized Abrahamic faiths. These personnel are also advised to keep holy water, a rosary, crucifix, cross, prayer rug, or any other symbol that has been blessed by an Abrahamic cleric or bishop. They should also have a copy of either the Torah, the Bible, or the Quran, and other standard emergency supplies in bug-out bags. The belief that SCP-001 will have a hand in the rapture is, at present, still widely debated among Site-0 staff, though nobody is prepared to completely rule it out as a possibility. Check out the DrBob Patreon and become a junior researcher today. Now go and watch another entry from the files of DrBob, like SCP-526, Valhalla Gate,